Now, the world's most indebted real estate developer, China Evergrande Group, has recently struck a deal over a $35.9 million US interest payment on a domestic bond. But the company still owes another payment of $83.5 million US on an offshore bond. Now, global stocks markets have been on high alert as China Evergrande faces key tests these next couple of weeks. The company has started to repay investors in its wealth management business with property, but China Evergrande has reportedly missed payments to at least two major banks as it struggles to raise funds to meet obligations. Now, there are also the companies that do business with Evergrande. Now, firms including construction and design firms and material suppliers are at risk of incurring major losses, which could force them into bankruptcy. Now, indeed, the debt crisis at property giant China Evergrande Group poses a challenge for many stakeholders. But what does the company's debt crisis mean for the China economy or even globally? Now, Metro TV's NajlaHilabi had a special talk with the news director of Greater China of the Associated Press, Ken Moritsugu.
The real estate developer Evergrande wants pinch on the debt. Investors are panicking and experts are warning of an imminent failure. But how does the company got to this point? We will discuss directly with the news director for Greater China and also AP reporter, Ken Moritsugu. Hello, Ken, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, Ken, as we know, China Evergrande has $300 billion in debt and may very well default on those debts. But please explain to us, to our viewers today, how it all started.
Well, Evergrande is one of the major developers, property developers in China. It has 1,300 projects in 280 cities, so it's huge. It's immense. It does apartment complexes, it does office buildings, office towers, and shopping malls. And the one thing that Evergrande has done that is maybe a little bit different than other developers is very highly leveraged. It really borrows a lot of money, and it essentially built its growth on borrowing. Now, a lot of these developers have done this, but Evergrande to a larger extent than many others. And as long as Evergrande was able to borrow money, the formula worked very well. In fact, in 2017, the founder of Evergrande was ranked as the wealthiest entrepreneur in all of China. So it worked well until the government decided that there really is too much debt floating around in the properties, in the real estate sector, too much speculation going on, and started curbing in and restricting how much debt property companies could have. And that's where Evergrande has really run into trouble and is now unable to actually borrow money to keep its operations going.
Yeah, but today, what are the Chinese government planning to do in regards to China Evergrande's debt crisis, and why have they not stepped in yet?
Well, it's a difficult balancing act for the Chinese government because the Chinese government is actually trying to rein in the amount of debt in the property sector. The Chinese government is worried that property developers, including Evergrande, but some others as well, have borrowed too much money and are carrying too much debt. And as the economy slows, that creates an economic risk that debt may not be sustainable over time. So the government is pushing or pressuring or actually requiring property developers to reduce the amount of debt they have on their books. It's sort of a long-term economic goal. But of course, the risk in doing that is if you push companies into bankruptcy, then you can really hurt economic growth in China. And that's the balancing act they're trying to maintain. But they don't want to bail out Evergrande because their ultimate goal is not to save real estate companies, but to get them to reduce their debt to manageable levels.
Yeah. But Ken, the real estate sector contributes greatly to China's GDP, around 30%, if I'm not wrong. The company's fallout will, of course, impact the Chinese economy, but how big of an impact is it? And what is the Chinese government plans to withstand the impact?
Well, it's hard to say what the economic impact of a default of a company as large as Evergrande would be. I mean, Evergrande is big, but it's not obviously the only real estate developer in China, and it's a huge sector. And I think the concern goes beyond just Evergrande, it goes to the whole sector in general. And basically, this sector has been growing rapidly, and as you mentioned, has been an important contributor to Chinese economic growth. But the government recognizes that there are risks, high risks in the way this growth has been happening, and is trying to curtail that growth in a way by limiting how much debt these companies can incur. So, I think the government is just going to have to watch what happens. Basically, I think the Evergrande situation sort of probably caught them a bit by surprise. They want to rein in debt, but they don't want to stop the economy, obviously. And so they, as with any country which has this sort of high level of debt and speculation, how do you sort of ease your way out of that situation without causing a crash? That's the challenge for the Chinese government.
Yeah, Ken, what is the mood amongst home buyers, retail investors, contractors? How is this affecting the public on a personal level? Are people preparing to lose their homes and their jobs?
Well, as you may be aware, there have been some protests. There have been people who have showed up at the headquarters of Evergrande in Shenzhen, in southern China. Not huge protests, but a few dozen people, and in various representing various groups, including home buyers, including investors and whatnot, who are worried about what's going to happen to them and for the home buyers for their homes. A lot of home buyers have actually paid up front for an apartment. And now, because of Evergrande's financial difficulties, construction has stopped on these projects. And also, they're worried what's going to happen. Are we going to lose our money and not have an apartment at the end of the day, kind of thing? Analysts that we've talked to generally say that the government is likely to protect home buyers. That's the one thing that they're going to be very sure to try to do. And whereas the investors and the people who have loaned money to Evergrande, they may be the ones who suffer any kind of losses. I wouldn't say there's a great panic at the moment, but I think this is having a depressing effect on the home market. I mean, people are, because of what's happening with Evergrande, other people are reluctant to put their money down on a new home right now.
Yeah. Ken, to sum up all of this, what is your perspective to this and how will this case develop further?
Well, I always say it's very hard to predict the future, so we'll have to see what happens. I think a lot of analysts believe that Evergrande's debt is simply unsustainable given the government's push to curtail debt held by real estate companies. And there's just no way that the Evergrande can meet the new requirements that the government is putting on all real estate companies. And so a lot of them think a default in some form is likely. Whether that ripples beyond to other real estate, how widely that ripples beyond other real estate companies is really the big question. As I said at the top of the interview, they don't hold as much debt, or they don't have as large a debt problem as Evergrande, but they all have debt to a certain degree and all have to meet these new requirements of the government. And so we'll just have to wait and see what exactly plays out and how it filters through the rest of the economy.